If you plan on creating a project where sizing is really important, like a cardigan or a sweater or a top or a hat, and you want to share that project in a pattern with somebody else, you'll want to pay close attention to this one. Well, hello there, and welcome to episode 15 of B.Hooked TV. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I am extra excited about this one. I mean, I've already had an entire cup of coffee. I totally need another one for this topic. It's a big one, especially if you are publishing patterns on your blog or on your website for fun or for extra income or whatever it may be. Think about the time that you have found a pattern and you saw it was available in, say, 6 different sizes, or say it was available in extra small all the way up to 5XL. More than likely, that designer only created one of those sizes, and they used pattern grading techniques to create all those other sizes. That's the basis of pattern grading. Now, to help me in my demonstration today, I'm going to be using one of my favorite sort of hidden gem yarns, and that's Lion Brand jeans. Big thanks to them, of course, for sponsoring the season, but first of all, it's incredibly soft. That's a big must for me when it comes to wearables. The other reason I really love it, and it may sound counterintuitive to be honest, it's the simplicity of it. This particular yarn, just the standard jeans, is available in 7 different colors, all inspired by jeans colors. So this one actually is sort of the oddball, but this is called top stitch. So think about your jeans where you've got that orange or like yellowy stitching. That's where this one kind of comes into play. I've got a couple other varieties. This one is faded, so it's a lighter color blue. I also really love this one. This one is brand new, so I tend to love really dark jeans, so I'm really drawn to this particular colorway. Like a lot of the yarns we talk about on this channel, jeans is in the worsted weight category. It's definitely one of my favorites to work with, and especially one of my favorites to work with on garments and sweaters and that sort of thing. Jeans is 100% acrylic. It's machine washable and dryable. Again, great for garments, but it's great for other things too. You know, that's sort of the focus of our conversation here today, but don't underestimate how wonderful this yarn would be for a scarf or a blanket. I'm thinking like a really good throw. This would be a good yarn because you can wash it if it tends to get loved a little bit too much, and it's affordable and it's easy to find. So those are 2 really great qualities to have in a yarn as well. So if you haven't tried jeans yet and you would like to give it a try for your next project, I'll have a link in the video description below. Just check that out. It'll direct you right to Lion Brand's website where you can see those other colorways that are available. You can read some reviews about it and that sort of thing and decide if it's right for your next project. Also, big thank you to you if you do use that link, and especially if you're able to purchase some yarn through that link. It's a big help to the show because Lion Brand is a sponsor. So for the basics and sort of a 101 guide, the most logical place to start is what pattern grading is. Chances are you've already got a pretty good idea of what it is based on just what you've seen so far and what you may have heard or read online. At its core, pattern grading is the act of converting a pattern into multiple different sizes. So let's talk about where you would start. If you're interested in creating your first wearable design, you want to offer it in different sizes, what's the first thing you need to do? Well, pattern grading for me specifically, and maybe for other designers as well, it really starts with the project. And I want to recommend that you create a garment or a wearable that's easy at first. Now, you can get really complex with those, especially if you're going for something that's really fitted and you need to have some shaping for, bust or that sort of thing. Those can get a little bit more complicated. However, there are a lot of really great sweaters and cardigans and that sort of thing out there that are made up of completely basic shapes, squares, rectangles. All right, so once you have that basic design in mind, you have the basic shapes mapped out. By the way, it might be helpful for you to draw this out, maybe sketch it out. You don't have to be an artist or really artsy. I'm definitely not a sketch artist, but I do like to sketch out my basic shapes for any garments or things that I'm thinking about making. so that I just have a visual in front of me of, okay, this is the size, this is the shape that I want it to be, and I need 3 panels to accomplish that. From there, it's time to swatch. And this is admittedly not all of our favorite task, but it is essential for pattern grading. You absolutely have to swatch, and you have to be pretty darn accurate with your swatch and with taking your measurements to have that confidence that your sizing will turn out and that it will be functional for somebody who's making that particular size. Now, the standard gauge measurement is a 4-inch by 4-inch square, and that is just my measuring area, 4 inches wide, 4 inches tall. So because there is some variance on the edges of your swatch and on the top and the bottom, I like to make my swatch bigger than 4 inches by 4 inches. So I'll usually shoot for about 5 or 6 inches wide by 5 or 6 inches tall. Then that gives me a nice solid 4-inch by 4-inch square that I can measure. So when I'm measuring my swatch, I will always use some type of ruler or like a hard measuring device. I don't want to use a tape measure because it's flexible. That has a potential to cause some variance, and I just want to eliminate that from the entire equation. From there, I'll stick the tick mark, the first tick mark on the very edge of that first stitch that I want to count. And I want to stand over top of that swatch. So I'm looking down exactly, so I have it as close as I possibly can to the edge of that stitch. It's not always cut and dry. It's not always super easy, and sometimes that 4-inch tick mark will end right smack dab into the middle of a stitch. Record that number accordingly, because later on, as you'll see when we do some of the calculations, that is factored into the overall size. It's actually multiplied by a factor. And so 1/4 of a stitch might not seem like too much, but when you multiply it out over a wider width than your 4 inches, it could be a big difference. Now, counting rows is not something that is really talked about a whole lot, so I do want to touch on that a little bit. In terms of measuring, it's not really any different, but just to sort of give you a visual, I take the same approach. I like to put that very first tick mark right smack dab on the top of a row and then count down from there. And if my 4-inch tick mark happens to end up in the middle of a row or maybe 3/4, like almost to the end of that row, I try to record that number as accurately as possible, again, so that way there's not a big variance within my calculations. So believe it or not, we're only about halfway through the process. We've got our design figured out. We know the shapes of the panels and how many panels are involved. We have our gauge swatch. We've recorded our measurements, our gauge measurements. From there, we need to know standard body sizes. For this, there is the most reliable resource that I would recommend. It's one that I use, and I know several other designers use that as well. And that is the Craft Yarn Council. They have standard body measurements available completely for free just on their website. I'll have them linked in the show notes as well, but they have different sizes for, say, if you're creating a sweater or a cardigan, you've got like standard body measurements in terms of like shoulder width and height and all that stuff. And then look at your panels, the way that garment is going to come together, and pinpoint those measurements that are important. I like to really rely on spreadsheets for this, and I am no spreadsheet whiz. I do like to use them a little bit, but you don't have to have like a ton of knowledge in order to put something like this together. But basically, I like the spreadsheet to do all of the work for me, so I don't have to worry about making any goofy mistakes with math or anything like that. So let's say, for example, I'm creating a cardigan and I want to include sizes extra small all the way to 2XL. I'll include all of those in its own column, each one getting its own cell. And I will have the width and the length. It's very basic right now. Now stick with me. I know we've covered a ton of ground. I totally warned you beforehand that this is a very complex topic, but let's just put it all together now at this point. So we have our basic information. We know what panels we need to create for the garment. We have our gauge swatch. We have our measurements. That's piece number one, like the puzzle piece number one. Then on the other side, we have the sizes we want to convert it to, and we have the basic measurements, the basic body measurements that we got from the Craft Yarn Council's website. That's puzzle piece number two. So now we need to sort of piece the two together to make this whole grading thing work out. And that's where the spreadsheet comes in handy. Now I'm going to refer you back to setting up your gauge spreadsheet, that tutorial, because that is sort of like the next step. You need to have all of that included in a spreadsheet. And because we've covered it here before, it'll just be easier and more detailed, more valuable for you if you're able to go and check out that video to create that spreadsheet. And so now when you set up your spreadsheet, like we saw in that previous tutorial, what your spreadsheet will do is take each one of your sizes and tell you how many stitches you need for the width of each of those sizes and how many rows you need for each one of those sizes. It does all of the hard work for you. Now, I will admit this is a lot of information to throw at you. Pattern grading is not an easy thing. It's definitely something that you can get the hang of, and it's something that you'll get better at the more you do it, but it's certainly one of those topics that when you first hear about it, your head's probably spinning a little bit. And that's certainly not my goal for you today. I really just want you to understand the basics of pattern grading, its purpose, how to get started, an easier way to think about it, and give you the next steps so that you can take what you've learned today and actually apply it to a design, whether it's something that gets published or not. The way for this to sink in is to do it. Now, I'm really interested to hear from you because I know this is something that maybe some of you will be really, really interested in, and some of you might be like, no, never want to hear about this again. Tell me what you think about this type of topic here on this channel. Is it something you're interested in learning more about? I mean, these are just the basics. But if you're interested in learning more about pattern grading so you can grade your own patterns, if maybe you don't have the resources to hire somebody to do this for you, I would love to be the person to help you sort of work through that and figure that out. But I only want to do it if it's interesting to you, if it's something you actually want to learn from me. So let me know in the comments below, do you want to know more about pattern grading? If so, what specific areas do you need more help with? Do you need more explanation for? And one last thing before I go, if you're looking to start that next garment and you're sort of not really sure of what type of yarn that you should use, seriously, check out Lion Brand Jeans. It's a really great foundation yarn for garments and wearables. Again, it's acrylic, it's soft, it's washable and dryable, all the things that you would want in a garment. Plus, it's really easy to crochet with. It has great stitch definition. So measuring your gauge swatch will be a lot easier because you can actually see the stitches really well. And of course, it's got that unique sort of color texture to it. So again, I'll have the link in the video description below where you can visit Lion Brand's website, see all the great things about Lion Brand jeans, and see if it's right for your next project. All right, that'll wrap up this week's episode of B.Hooked TV. Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate it as always, and I'll see you in the next one.